Earlier this summer, and thank you again, Devin, the GCSA published the results of their latest survey to measure water use in the United States by golf courses. And today we're going to learn about all the data, the insights, the highlights, the key moments from this. We're talking 1,500 courses, including 120 in the Southwest. And our guest, our speaker, who has come all the way from Florida to share this information and try to weed out the less important stuff and really hit on the key points, is Dr. Brian Unruh from the University of Florida. So I would hope you'd give him a warm welcome for coming all the way from Gainesville, I believe. I hope. Thank you, Brian.
Well, good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to come out. I'm the dude from the blue side of the state, or the nation. I had 78 inches of rain at my research facility last year, so don't shoot. So I drew the short straw and get to come out and speak to you about water use as it was reported from golf course superintendents who responded to the GCEP3 water use survey that was put out there. And so you've seen a lot of data, and I think we start out with this definition of benchmark, and benchmark is that point of reference. And we've seen Devin present a lot of that benchmarking data specific to this region. And so as we think about what GCSA did and what they embarked on back in 2006, it was to provide this baseline information relative to water use and pesticides, nutrients, just property profile. So that was all initiated in 2006, and then another series of those GCEP2 surveys were launched in 2014, again, looking energy use, water, pesticides, nutrients, so on and so forth. And GCEP3 surveys were initiated last year, and they're a collaborative effort between the GCSAA. They administer and oversee and keep us, they kind of herd the cat, so to speak, on this. And then it's a partnership with the National Golf Foundation, where they provide the insight of the survey, the tool, the programming, the distribution, so on and so forth. They do the analysis of the projected water use, and I'll speak to that in more detail. And then in this go-around, Dr. Travis Shaddix, a colleague of mine previously at the University of Florida and the University of Kentucky, and now a consultant, we focused on the scientific aspects. We've published the research papers. We're publishing and putting together the public profile report. And then in the current issue of Golf Course Management, you can see kind of the Reader's Digest condensed version of the water report. And so if you were to go to gcsa.org, you would be able to see these three publications. The one there on your right is, if you scan that QR code that is on the table, it has been placed in the resource folder as well. Well, let's talk about GCEP3 and the survey and how it was put out there. And then we'll talk about kind of some of the limitations to that. And so the survey was distributed to 14,145 golf courses, facilities. And then a facility is defined as a place where golf can be played at potentially one or more courses that are within a facility. Each phase of the GCEP survey, so survey 1, 2, and 3, they target the same population. However, the respondents from those three different surveys are not necessarily identical. So superintendents have come, superintendents have gone, some courses closed, so obviously that data is not reported in subsequent surveys. And so it's important to understand that these are longitudinal surveys, but the same respondents aren't necessarily responding each and every time. Respondents' names were omitted from the data file, and that's critically important, and the data file is not shared publicly, for some obvious reasons. And so that anonymity is important, so the superintendents are confident that the data they provide is anonymized within the survey. And only one response is allowed per golf course. Again, if you're one of these superintendents that oversee multiple golf courses within a facility, the facility is represented by the number of courses that are there. So if we look at the survey distribution and response, you see that for ease of comparison and to maintain consistency between that benchmark survey conducted back in the early 2000s and moving forward, we see that survey responses are categorized in these 7 geographic regions. Now the challenge with that, and these regions are based off of of Jim Beard, not to be confused with Jim Baird, a book that, years ago, and these were the agronomic regions were put out. But as we know, and we just saw even within the Southern California, there's just tremendous variability. And so when I speak about the Southwest region, realize that that data is amalgamized across a huge region with a lot of variability as well. You look, for example, even in the Southeast. I had 78 inches of rainfall last year in the Pensacola area where I'm based, and I'm in the same region as eastern Oklahoma, who did not receive 78 inches of rain. So these are very large regions agronomically. Facility type is categorized daily fee, municipal, and private. Number of holes, 9, 18, 27 plus, and then a range of green fee structures in there to just kind of look at that economic component that is there. Back up one. You can also see the survey responses were received from 1,575 facilities representing about 11% of the U.S. Total golf population. Compare that to the 2014 and the 2006 surveys, and you can see our response numbers are starting to decline. We as a people are suffering from what they call survey fatigue. We're being surveyed about everything. And so we see this response declining over time, but still 11.1% response is still a very valid response for a survey of this size. When we head over to the Southeast, 1,139 golf courses in the Southwest U.S., 8.1% of the facilities, we received 127 surveys back from this Southwest region, which is 8.1%. So we're confident that the survey responses that are coming in are quite valid. You can see the red dots on that map of where those responses are coming from as well. So the data are weighted, and that's NGF's thing. They get in and realize that there are 16 categories of data that are there. And so, for example, let's say we know that 9-hole golf courses are a small percentage. And getting 9-hole golf courses to respond to a survey are even fewer. And so the NGF looks at that data, and then they will either emphasize those underrepresented courses through data weighting, or they will underemphasize those courses that are maybe over weighted in the survey. And then, of course, appropriate statistical procedures are incorporated. Projected water use and projected irrigated acres, those are determined by NGF, and what they're simply taking is the number of golf courses in a particular region and then multiplying it by the regional water use that is reported by the superintendents. And so the projected data and the projected irrigated acres, we cannot do statistical procedures on those, so you can't compare, one year versus the next when you look at those projected data. Okay. Couple things I think are also important to clarify are just what do these water units mean? And so when we look at projected applied water, that's what I just described, where we simply take the number of facilities in a region, multiply it by that mean value, and it provides that estimate of the total volume of water that was applied to those facilities. And then we look at median applied water, and that is the amount of water that is applied to a golf facility regardless of the facility's irrigated acres. So superintendent reported, I put 90 acre feet of water, that's what goes in. Some superintendents are reporting 60, some are more. And so that is, and again, it's median, and I'll speak to that again in the next slide, but we're just simply, it's kind of where half of the facilities are above that number, half the facilities are below that number. And then I think maybe most importantly is that a median applied water per acre, because that is a measure of water use efficiency. When we think about low flow toilets, low flow shower heads, that's a water use efficiency feature that's built into that equipment. And so when we look at water, median applied water per acre, we're normalizing it based off of a unit area. And so again, and I think that's one that is critically important. The 2014 surveys, Pace Turf, Larry and Wendy, really spent a lot of time moving from the mean to the median. And of course, a mean is, you take all the numbers and you total them, and then you divide it by the number of numbers you have, and that gives you the mean. Versus the median, which is a midpoint within a distribution. And so the means can be greatly influenced by either low or high outliers, whereas the median is just the midpoint where half the numbers are above and half the numbers are below. And so in survey data, median is the most valuable number to be using, and it provides a better or more accurate representation of what we are seeing. Well, let's jump into some of the results here. And I think before we go too far, we want to talk about the what versus the why. Because what's happening is this survey tells us the what, but not necessarily the why. And one of the first things we want to do is to jump in and try to explain the why with the data that is coming off of the what questions. And so one of the challenges, our superintendents are simply reporting, this is what we did. This is how many acres we have. This is how much water we applied. These were the management practices we implemented. But very few questions ask the why. Why do we do what we do? And that's the million-dollar question, is what motivates us and why do we do? You know, and where I live, 78 inches of rain, and I leave a neighborhood and sprinklers are running even when it's raining. Why do people do that? And I'm at a loss, literally I lost all my hair trying to figure that out. So the what versus the why. The other thing before we jump into this is that we want to take a lot of times this data and we want to paint a Mona Lisa with a 4-inch paintbrush. And so the data that I'm about to unpack with you are very 4-inch paintbrush data, okay? And so it's very challenging to get in, and again, remember those agronomic regions are very large and very diverse. I mean, even what we just saw within this region here of Southern California, tremendous variability, and those surveys, those superintendents that are responding to the survey are not digging into the depth of what Devin just shared with us. And so let's go in. Okay, so you can get the report there. So let's look at projected water use on the U.S. Gulf facilities. So this is 1.68 million acre feet of water was applied to U.S. Gulf facilities in 2020. So broad brush, and you'll see this coming out in press releases, 29.1% reduction since 2005. That's across the entire country. That's across all golf courses in the U.S. And so 29.1% reduction, but we come over here to the southwest and maybe not. We're not seeing a 29% reduction, but our projected water was 8% less in 2020 than it was in the benchmark survey that was done in 2005, and that's resulted in a water savings of about 44,000 acre feet. And so projected water use, again, taking those number of facilities, simply multiplying it by the number that the superintendents have reported back for us and telling us what's happening. We dig into median applied water on U.S. Gulf facilities, and we see here that we're at about 66.3 acre feet, which is about 24% less than what was reported in 2005, and it's equivalent to what we saw in 2013. And so somewhere between 2005 and 2013, when we look across this data, really across most regions except the Southwest, we see this pretty significant reduction in water use from 2005 to 2013, and then we're kind of status quo from 2013 on. And so when we head to the Southwest here, we see that median applied water per facility is 375.7 acre feet in 2020, which is equivalent to 2005. So we're not seeing much of a movement in that needle within golf facilities in the Southwest. When we look at median acre feet per acre, so that's that measure of potential measure of conservation, we see that applied water per U.S. Gulf facility in 2020 was 1.01 acre feet, which is about 22%, 23% less than what was in 2005. And you compare that to some of the numbers, and I've been visiting with different folks and making some phone calls over the last few weeks, and people are sitting back saying, "Ooh, that's a low number." Again, this is a projected number across the entire industry in the U.S. And so similar to acre feet, the acre feet per acre value was similar to what was reported in 2013. Again, saw this reduction from the first baseline survey of 2005 through the 2013 survey, and then we're pretty much kind of remaining in that same ballpark in the 2020 survey. Head to the Southwest here, we've seen that number going the other way. And so median applied water per acre increased from about 3.43 acre feet in 2005 to 4.18 acre feet in 2022, so about a 22% increase in water use on an foot per acre basis in the Southwest region. Again, huge region, lots of variability. And so, well, let's look at water sources on facilities in the Southwest U.S. And in 2020, about 34% of the projected applied water was sourced from wells, and about 15% was sourced from municipal water supply. And so then we look at 2020, about 33% of the projected applied water was sourced from recycled water. And so that's just kind of showing you that pinpointing of where this water is coming from. Now what's interesting is, as Devin shared, is you may not know what's coming through that pipe and what, where it was, unless that pipe is painted purple. And so that's where this can get a little bit squirrely when trying to interpret some of this data as well. Well, if we look at recycled water on U.S. golf facilities in 2020, about 12.6% of U.S. golf facilities were using reclaimed water. But if you look here in the Southwest, roughly 3 times as many golf facilities are using reclaimed water. And so I think that is a great statement there, and we just see why that is happening. If we look at that kind of that acre feet of water on a facility, we saw from 2005 to 2020, basically, in that midpoint, there was some level of increase within reclaimed water, both nationally and within the Southwest, but we've kind of seen that use of reclaimed water settle back down a little bit, although in the Southwest, we're still about 9% greater reclaimed water use than we saw in 2005. Well, here is one of these questions that does get a little bit to the why. Why is reclaimed water not being used on a particular facility? And we look at the national level, about 51% of superintendents saying it's just simply no source of reclaimed water, versus in the Southwest, 42% of our superintendents are telling us that there is not a source of reclaimed water available to them. Nationally, about 14% of us are saying we have a source, but we just don't have the infrastructure to get it to the facility. And in the Southwest, interestingly, that number's actually increased. About 21.5% of superintendents are saying we have the source, but we don't have infrastructure to get that to us as well. Something that's interesting to me is that unnecessary column that is there, that we're seeing really across the country. Roughly 30% of superintendents are telling us that it is unnecessary to use reclaimed water. Well, why is it unnecessary? It's because there is this view that we have other water sources that are available. And even in the Southwest, it's telling us that we have 32% of the superintendents are responding that we have other water sources that are available to us. But just as we've heard from the previous speaker, that maybe not so. And definitely as we think forward into the future. Well, if we look at projected irrigated acres of U.S. golf facilities here in the Southwest, we are seeing a reduction in irrigated acres on our facilities. Again, this is projected data, so statistics are not in play here, but regardless to whether it's a 9, an 18, or a 27-plus hole facility, we've seen a reduction in irrigated acres taking place on golf facilities in the Southwest. And that differs than what we see really across the country, because interestingly, across the country, we're seeing actually an increase in irrigated acres. In the Southwest, you're seeing a decrease when you compare the totals. And most of that is largely coming from nationally, from roughs, from practice areas, and from landscapes. And so I'm seeing some increasing there. In the Southwest, though, we're seeing really all course attributes, roughs, practice areas, and landscape are reducing that irrigated footprint. Fairways are staying relatively constant in the irrigated acres. And so factors motivating the decision, so again, kind of slipping in a little bit to that kind of that why side of things. Superintendents are reporting, in the Southwest that 35% of them are saying, the water cost is a factor. Regulations, 16% are saying, we're reducing irrigated acres because of regulation. Then that regulation could take a lot of shapes, and so these water or turf removals and type things, infrastructure type things, can motivate that. Across the country, water conservation is fairly consistent. It is interesting to note in that upper West Mountain, we see a significant bump there where about 80% of superintendents are telling us that water conservation is kind of a big deal. And then both in the Pacific, the Southwest, and the upper West Mountain, we're seeing drought is really starting to drive these and serve as motivation to reduce irrigated acres. Well, one of the things you see in kind of the national headlines is, where is this water reduction coming from when we think about a national perspective? And if we look at the change in the number of facilities between 2005 and 2020, we see about 11.9% reduction in facilities. So in 2005, there were 16,000 golf courses in the country, down to 14,145. And that 11.9% reduction in water or in facilities resulted in about 234,000 acre-feet of water being reduced, which is roughly about 33%, again at the national level, 33% of the water reduction over the from the benchmark survey of 2005 through 2020 is coming from courses no longer even operating. In the Southwest, not quite so much. We're seeing about a 7% reduction in courses across the Southwest, courses that were closed, resulting in about 41,000 acre-feet of water being reduced as a result. We'll focus a little bit on management practices, and there are a whole list of management practices that superintendents can respond to. Are we doing this or are we not doing this? And a whole list of them. And by and large, most of those management practices really haven't changed significantly from 2005, 2013 to 2020. But there are a few notable exceptions. The Southwest is the only region showing an increase in the adoption of new irrigation controller technology. So across the country, superintendents aren't really switching up controllers, but in the Southwest you are. And so controller technologies. The Southwest has the greatest use of handheld moisture sensors, and it is the region with the most significant adoption of this technology. So when we think of the TDR 300s, the TDR 350s, or the POGOs, more superintendents in the Southwest are using that technology, probably all because of Brian Whitlock. So, the Southwest, 51% of golf course superintendents indicate that they have reduced irrigated acres. We spoke to that. And the Southwest is second only to the Pacific region in the use of hand watering, which is obviously a very labor-intensive, time-consuming practice. But Southwest and the Pacific are the two regions where hand watering is a major management practice that are employed on their facilities. This slide is particularly concerning to me as one who speaks really across the country to the national audience, and this is the threat of scarcity or increasing water costs. When we look at that in the U.S., roughly half of our superintendents say there is absolutely no concern about water scarcity. That to me is tremendously concerning, because what happens in one part of the industry impacts the other part of the industry. And so we see these national headlines, even in a region that has 78 inches of rainfall, such as where I am from, and folks aren't too concerned over there about what's happening in the Southwest. But rising tide raises all ships. And so what's happening in the Southwest, in some of the articles that have hit the national, or the press in the Southwest, those reverberations are felt across the industry as a whole. And so I think it's concerning to me that, again, that 50% of our superintendents in the country aren't concerned about water scarcity. That obviously isn't the case in the Southwest, where only 17% of our superintendents are reporting that water scarcity is kind of a big deal. We look at water cost, and that's an interesting factor as well. 58% of the superintendents say they have absolutely no concern. In the early stages of the pandemic, a number of my colleagues and I across the country started meeting via Zoom, and we put together and we published two papers that really kind of got into the nuts and bolts of, and really were aimed at kind of municipalities saying, because of COVID, presumed budget reductions that are going to happen within the municipalities, don't go cut your budgets for Parks and Rec, because it provides a number of ecosystem services. Turf does, provides a place for people to get out and recreate. We obviously saw golf just boomed during the COVID. But one of the interesting pieces, and we put some economics in there of cost of maintenance of turf and whatnot, and one of the interesting pieces that came out of that was it's very difficult to get good numbers on water. Because we seem to, in the Southwest, people are paying an extreme amount for water, and it's a major part of their budgets. But throughout a lot of the country, water doesn't cost anything. And so consequently, it was difficult to get to that. And so when we look at water cost values, that's why I think we see across much of the country, except in the southwest Pacific, and maybe upper West Mountain, where we see that water cost is a consideration. You know, golf gets a black eye because a lot of people presume that, you know, well, then those private courses over there use more resources than the public courses. And what we see, at least as it pertains to water use, there is no difference between the public golf course and the private golf course. They are both using an equal amount of water, as the survey has informed us. When we look at frequency of water use restrictions, and so these are superintendents responding, you know, how do the golfers see, you know, how do they interpret when they look out on the golf course and they see brown spots or they see less turf. And it's interestingly that across the country, the superintendents are telling us that most of their golfers are fairly receptive to these drought conditions, except in the Southwest. In the Southwest, roughly 1 out of 10 are telling us that they don't want to see any blighted turf out there as a result of irrigation not happening. And so I think that's an education point that we can work on as well. Last Wednesday, I had the opportunity on the PGA Tour channel on XM Radio or whatever it was, and knowing most of the people that are listening to that show were golfers, and so we just kind of hit that point that golfers somehow we've got to work on their response to this drought issue as well. Water use treatments on U.S. golf facilities. The Southwest have a couple of interesting factors. Acid injection, sulfur, and gypsum, of course, are three management practices that are injected into the water stream to address these water quality concerns that are there that Devin mentioned. And in the Southwest, we see those three are elevated over anywhere else in the country. And then interestingly, in the Southwest as well, highest water wetting agent use is in the Southwest region. Makes sense as well. And then meteorological factors, we can speak about that, but also, you know, just the soils, the effective rainfall, so rainfall coming at the wrong time of year, water holding capacity. I mean, I still get mini droughts where I'm from in Florida, and it's all related to the fact that I have very sandy soils. And so I have no water holding capacity, and so I experience short-term droughts, not mega droughts as well. Golf course superintendents are really embracing growing degree days, and there's some reasons behind that. And so they're playing around with growing degree days to time their plant growth regulator applications or insecticide applications. And so we just kind of took this opportunity to kind of link some of this water use data back to growing degree days, because again, that's something superintendents are immersing themselves in right now. And growing degree days, if you're not familiar with them, it's a heat unit model, and so it's just a way of tracking a heat accumulation. And so as heat accumulates, then it can be conferred to growing grass. And so we just simply took 30-year growing degree day norms and divided it by 30-year rainfall norms. And what you see is that as those graphs in that lower right, the flatter the graph generally means that rainfall is sufficient to at least keep up with the growth of the plant. And where you see those peaks in those graphs, those are regions, obviously Southwest Pacific, where rainfall is not going to keep up with plant growth. And again, it was just trying to put some of this data into context that the superintendent setting on at their golf facility can be able to embrace. And so there are combined 130 tables and graphs in the public report. 25 minutes doesn't allow us time to dig into those, but the highlights, just skipping the rock across the water here, I gave us. And so my email address is on the bottom of that screen. If you have questions that pertain to that information, let me know. And with that, a couple questions.
Anyone?
I've got one. So the last survey was 2020. Obviously, there's got this mega drought that we've talked about as well too. Is there a plan for a new survey this year, next year, or just your estimation on the differences between 20 and today?
So one of the things, when we look at that water use data, so when the superintendents were asked, they were asked to kind of give us 3 years worth of their water use information. And so that's how that kind of built in. So the data shows 2020, but that's kind of the survey, but it really is looking over a 3-year period. What were those numbers? I think it is GCSAA's intent to move forward with a much quicker survey response. Instead of every 5 years, I think they wish to move it into more often. And then personally, I would like to see going really to state level data. But that gets really hairy when you think about it. And honestly, we have across the region, we have an appropriate number of courses responding, but within individual states, a lot of times we would have to really significantly improve survey participation to get valid representation if we wanted to do state level data. So. All right.
Anyone else?
I cede my 1 minute.